merciful, and may God's peace and blessings be upon His holy Prophet Muhammad and the purified members of his household and progeny. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bi thina'ik. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Respected sisters, dear brothers, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The discussion that we began yesterday about the crucial roles that women have played in Islam triggered a significant amount of feedback and interest and requests to continue the discussion. And so inshallah today we are going to continue that general theme, looking at it from an entirely different angle, inshallah. The idea was that we want to look at the history of Islam to try to find role models, practical cases of women who can be considered as having displayed great amounts of leadership and who therefore evoke in all of us inspiration and the desire to be better and to follow in their footsteps. And as we said, these are not role models only for our sisters and mothers and daughters. These are role models for all believers and all Muslims and all followers of Ahlul Bayt. And one rich area that we did not look at until now are Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam themselves. The examples that we gave as part of our discussion were intentionally chosen from women that all of us, you and I, should consider as normal people like us. The examples that we looked at, and there were many, and there were many, many more that we did not mention yesterday, are all women who should evoke in us the desire to be better and who are ordinary women. These are not the infallibles. These are not the divinely guided people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants His special favors. These are ordinary people like you and I who are based on their own efforts and actions and sacrifices. They were able to achieve the highest of ranks and to become role models that Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam identify for us, mention for us, list for us as being our role models. It should therefore go without saying that if we turn our attention to the lives of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, we are going to find a lot more cases of such women, but in this case, women who are living in the proximity of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, and if for no other reason, are going to therefore receive special guidance, special favors, and will have special status and merits. Today, inshallah, we want to focus on this area. The second area of focus, and one that I think deserves a lot more attention, a lot more research on our part, is specifically the area about the mothers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, our imams. This is an area that is ripe for research, and it could be looked at from different angles. But in short, we should all have a lot of interest in studying the lives of these women from the perspective of their motherhood of the imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. I think we can all safely assume that if an imam chooses a woman as his wife and the mother of his son who will become an imam, then that woman has a personality and is a figure that deserves to be studied by us. And today, inshallah, this is our next line of focus in the woman that we want to look at. Specifically, our attention is going to be around the mother of the Imam of our time, Imam al-Mahdi ajalallah ta'ala farajahu al-sharif, by focusing on this woman, not purely for the historical purpose of the discussion, even though that would be of great interest. When we began the series this holy month, this month of Muharram, we said that when we love someone or even any object, we are going to want to know everything that we can about it. All of us are lovers of the Imam of our time. I therefore have no doubt that we want to know everything that we can about him, all details about his life, and that includes anything that we can learn about his mother. That's the general area, perhaps, of interest. But the truth is, for this specific woman, there's a lot more, many more reasons for us to want to study her life and to understand who she is. I hope that this is not going to be taken as an exaggeration when I say that if we go back to the lives of the women in the lives of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, it would be very difficult for us, I don't want to say impossible, it will be very difficult for us to find any other woman, perhaps behind Fatimah al-Zahra alayha as-salam and Sayyidah Zainab, and even for Sayyidah Zainab it is arguable, that has received the type of praise and the type of high qualities mentioned by Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam as has the mother of our Imam. This woman has been mentioned in numerous ahadith by the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and by many of our Imams as being a very special woman, carrying the highest of status, perhaps by more Imams than many other women in the lives of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, and yet we find ourselves not really knowing much about her. And this should enough for us be enough of a reason to look at her life and to see why this woman would deserve this type of attention from Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. We have a hadith about her from the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from Imam Ali, from Imam Al-Hasany, from Imam Al-Baqir, Al-Sadiq, Al-Kadhim, and Al-Ridha. And this gives us 7 ma'sumin, 7 infallibles praising this woman, way before she is born and way before she is performing her role. In addition to other praises, and we will see one of them inshallah by Our Lady Hakimah as we go through our discussion. Further than that, there is an interest in studying her life that has to do with the theological dimension, with the belief dimension related to believing in the Imam of our time. This has been an area of attack by those who want to show that, or at least put doubt around the idea that the Imam of our time has been born and is alive. And so we see that her personality and every detail about her life has been attacked, has been questioned, has been filled with question marks, because if we can establish and create doubt about her personality and the details around her life, perhaps through this path we can establish that the Imam in fact was never born and he does not currently exist as the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam believe. And so this is a very important theological point to keep in mind and to provide even more of a reason for us and motivation for us to look into the life of this woman specifically. As we said, today the discussion is not about studying her life for the sake of studying her life. And I say this because I'm not going to go into a lot of the details related to her life. The idea is that we pursue our discussion related to looking for role models in our Islamic history, women who play very clear, very crucial, very important roles based on the values of our religion, based on the teachings of our religion, so that this provides clear role models for us to be able to walk in their footsteps. So if we start looking at the life of this specific woman from the beginning, her name is an object of study and an object of research. And I will not go through all the different opinions and all the different arguments presented about her name. But I have to say a few remarks because this is an important point. The argument that has been made over time is that if there is such disagreement about her name, then perhaps she was never born. How can there be disagreement about the name of someone if they truly existed? So perhaps we're not referring to a person who actually existed in history. That's the core of the argument against this woman because of the difference of opinion about her name. And to this, we can answer in multiple ways. First, and this is perhaps an important point to mention in general about all the women in the lives of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, because this is not special to her case. I don't think that it would be surprising for any of us to know that Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, the men and the women in their families, had great chastity. And so when it came to the lives of the women in their lives, of course a lot of those details about their lives would remain intimate and confidential, and they would not go public with a lot of the details, the personal details about the women in their lives, and the women themselves would not attempt to make any of those details well known to the public. And this is a matter of chastity. And anyone who understands this value and this teaching in our religion would of course expect the highest levels of chastity in the lives of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and their family members. And so this already becomes a source of a lack of well-defined qualities, including the names of these women. That's a first point. A second point, and many of our scholars have spoken about this and written about this, has to do with the fact that in the case of this woman specifically, it seems that there was an intention from the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam to create confusion and doubts about her personality, about who she really was, about what her name was, and about every detail of her life. And this has to do with the period, the time in which those Imams lived, and the specific role that she was going to have to play, which is to become the mother of the 12th Imam. And this is a topic that requires a lot of study, that would have to bring us back to the lives specifically of Imam Al-Hadi and Imam Al-Askari, and the type of existence that they had to lead under the tyrannical Abbasid regime of their time that brought them to the city of Samarra, a city that was basically a military base. And that's why they are called Al-Askariyin, because that city used to also be called Al-Askar. It was simply a military base. And within that military base, the Imams were put in a house under house arrest. Both Imam Al-Hadi and Imam Al-Askari. And that's why we refer to him as Imam Al-Askari. He was under house arrest in a city that was simply a military base. And the Imams had guards and soldiers, men and women, who were all around their houses and who would freely walk and circulate and examine their houses at any time of the day and the night. And this is how the entirety of Imam Al-Hadi and Imam Al-Askari's lives were spent in Samarra. And a lot of this had to do with the fact that Bani al-Abbas were well aware that we are now getting closer to the birth of the 12th Imam based on the claims of the Shia. And they wanted to do everything in their power to prevent that 12th Imam from being born. And now is not the time to go through all the details related to this, but everything in the lives of Imam al-Hadi and Imam al-Askari has to be looked at from this point of view. And then we understand the types of lives that they lived, the types of difficulties and challenges that they had to endure, and therefore why they would want to keep the identity of this woman, including her name, a secret, or at least a matter of confusion, so that people would not really know which one is which in the woman who used to live in that household and the woman who would go in and out of that household. All of that to say, specifically in her case, to summarize the discussion, it seems that her name was Narjis, and so this is the name that we will use along in our discussion today, one. And two, we will refer to one of her nicknames because there's enough evidence that this is the name that was used, especially after she got pregnant. In the Ruwayat, Imam al-Askari alayhi salam, her husband, used to refer to her by a second name after she got pregnant. And whether this was just simply a nickname that he had for her, or because he wanted to create even more confusion now that she was pregnant, changing her identity in that way, he referred to her as Suqayl, Saqil or Suqayl, while her initial name was Narjis. There are many other names given. I will skip that discussion for the sake of brevity. The second discussion has to do with her origins. Where did this woman come from? This would take us into the parts of her history that I'm trying to avoid, that are not entirely relevant to today's discussion. So I'll simply point to the fact that there is a little bit of disagreement between the ulama, between the scholars who have studied her life, as the riwayat mention a couple of different areas, geographical areas and ethnicities to which this woman may have belonged. The two most well-known areas would have been that she came from somewhere in Roma, and I think most of us would know this from the recent movie that has appeared and the stories around it, The Princess of Roma. And according to that version of history, her name would be Malika or Malika. Or she came from Nubia, which is northeastern Africa. And there is strong evidence for both, and this would require a study to see where we land in our discussion. But the truth is, for where we want to go, we're more interested in the role that this woman played, and not so much where she came from. Whether this woman was of African descent or whether she was of Roman descent makes no difference to the role that she ended up playing in her life. There is, however, a detail that I think is very worth mentioning about her ancestry. And it's that in the Ruwayat it is mentioned that she is a descendant of Sham'un al-Safa. Sham'un being, the proper translation for him would be Saint Peter. One of the disciples, apostles of Prophet Isa alayhi salam, Prophet Jesus, and his story is mentioned in the Holy Quran. In Surah Yasin, starting from verse 14, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that there's a town where we send two messengers, and then we strengthen them by sending a third. The third is Sham'un al-Safa. The third is no ordinary man. And the Christians considered him to be a saint. And there is an enormous amount of literature about Saint Peter, and that would take us in a completely different place if we wanted to dig into it. And I mention it because this is perhaps an area that deserves a lot more attention from us. Us followers of the Imam of our time. We need to pause here and wonder for ourselves and reflect on why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make things in such a way that the mother of the Imam of our time has to come from a descendants from the father's side, coming directly from the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam through all of the Imams, and on her mother's side coming directly from Christianity and the purest sources of Christianity. And perhaps this has something to do with the mission that will be carried out by the Imam of our time at the end of times, giving him a lot more credibility and an even greater influence in the world because of this ancestry when he will reappear, inshallah. That's a discussion for another time. It's simply to note a point. The next point I think in the discussion should be about when did this woman pass away? And I mention this because according to some reports, weak and considered not authentic, she passed away before the martyrdom of her husband, Imam Al-Askari alayhi salam. And this is not considered something very authentic or strong or to be trusted by pretty much all of our scholars and all historians. So instead we have to look at when did she pass away as being the first point into entering into studying her life. In the riwayat, we are told that Shaykh al-Saduq mentions, and Shaykh al-Mufid also mentions, that when Imam al-Askari alayhi salam had been poisoned and he is getting ready to leave this world, there were only 3 people with him in his room. One of them was his son, Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu farajah. One of them was a servant of his, and one of them was this woman, his wife, Narjis. And this is an important point to keep in mind because this is going to force us to think about whether this woman received very specific instructions from Imam al-Askari alayhi salam on what to do next after his martyrdom, and the type of role that she had to play in perhaps one of the most difficult periods and chapters in the history of Tashayyu'. She was going to have to carry a very important role, a very important mission. And so perhaps Imam al-Askari alayhi salam wanted to keep the place for himself and her so that he can give her instructions without anyone else receiving those instructions, as they are secret and sensitive, of delicate nature. We're told in the riwayat, and I will mention it now because this is important and I will come back to this figure at the end. There's also a woman in the life of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam of huge importance, and it is his own mother, the grandmother of Imam al-Mahdi ajjalallahu farajah. We are told that the Imam gave her specific instructions to go perform Hajj that year, so that when he passes away, she is not present. And it seems most likely that her mission at that time was to go and start spreading the news of the presence of the 12th Imam as having been born in Mecca and Medina. And so she was sent on a mission. The mother of Imam al-Askari is being sent on a mission because the Imam is about to depart from this world. And he wants to make sure that the message is reaching the closest of the companions of the Imams. So keep this in mind. We're going to come back to it a little bit later. Now, what about the activities of this woman? And here's where we are confronted with the great injustices committed against her. First, because of the difficulties that she had to endure in her life. And secondly, because most of us don't know anything about this. We don't mention it, we don't study it, we don't talk about it, as we try to do to some extent, at least for the rest of Ahlul Bayt alayhum as-salam. And it seems that the difficulties of this woman started the same day that Imam al-Askari alayhi salam was martyred and passed away. She was in the room, as we said. The Imam passes away, and the news starts to spread that the Imam of the Shia, Imam al-Askari alayhi salam, has now left this world. This is going to open a direct confrontation with a man by the name of Jaafar. Jaafar is the brother of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam. And to understand who he is, we have to understand what the Abbasids were trying to do. We said that during the time of Imam al-Hadi and Imam al-Askari, the Abbasids were well aware that everything is pointing towards the last Imam, the 12th Imam being born. So they started to work hard to try to find a personality that would be acceptable for the Shia as an alternative Imam, for them to follow instead of these men that they can't control. A man that they create, an agent of theirs who works in a way that matches their agendas and their plans and their desires, and who would be also acceptable by generally the Shia. And they didn't find a better man than the brother of Imam Al-Hasany Al-Askari, the son of Imam Al-Hadi, that many Shia called Jaafar al-Kadhab, Jaafar the liar, for having claimed to be the Imam at the time, not only after Imam al-Askari, but during the life of Imam al-Askari. He started to put in place the foundation that he is the legitimate Imam, using previous ideologies from the Shia, from the Waqifa, a special group of Shia, deviant group, that created claims that an Imam can only be an Imam based on a certain relationship that he has with his son, when his son has to be born before he is the age of 40, and so on and so forth. And they applied this in the time of Imam al-Kadhim and Imam al-Rida. And they rejected the Imam of Imam al-Rida based on this, because Imam al-Rida did not have Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam until he was beyond 40. And so they did not believe in his imamah, and they rejected his imamah simply because Imam al-Rida alayhi salam had Imam al-Jawad after 40. So they revived all of this at the time of Imam al-Askari, being sure that Imam al-Askari did not have a son, not knowing that Imam al-Mahdi Ajjallahu Farajah had been born by then. So they put everything in place, and they got rid of Imam al-Askari with the next Imam ready to go, the next Imam being Jaafar al-Kadhab. They poisoned Imam al-Askari alayhi salam, and as soon as the news spread, Jaafar came to perform the burial rites and to perform the salah on his brother. And so when the people came, and this is when you see that the whole thing has been well organized, as soon as the people would come, they would express their condolences to Jaafar, and at the same time they would congratulate him on having become the new Imam. And then the Ruwayah says, as he stood to perform the prayer, there's a child that appeared. A child between 5 and 7 years old. His complexion was tanned, with spacing between his teeth, and having curly hair, who came and who pulled on his clothes. And he told him, my uncle, it is much worthy of me to perform the prayer upon my father's body, not you. Stand back. And Jaafar became yellow, and he was trembling, and he stepped back, and they all stood, and this young boy performed the prayer upon Imam al-Askari alayhi salam. And then Jaafar left, and many people started to ask questions and wonder, who is this boy and what has just happened? Going to Jaafar, Jaafar got confused and very mad. There's many more things and details around this story that I have to skip for now, but Jaafar went directly to the Khalifa, telling him, were we not sure that he doesn't have a son? Now a boy has appeared who claims to be his son. How did this happen? And so right away, the Khalifa of the time, he sends a group of soldiers to the house of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam to start searching. This is when our Imam went to one of the houses that had a lower floor. They followed the Imam in that house, and he was nowhere to be found. And this is the Sardab. This is the basement. And so all sorts of fabrications and myths around how the Imam may be hiding in the basement. The Imam is not hiding in the basement. The Imam simply walked into a basement and they could not find him afterwards. In any case, so they came to the house, the investigation started, the searching started. At the same time, this is about when the mother of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam comes back to the city, and she opens a confrontation with Jaafar. again, to keep in mind how she played an important role. The mother of Imam Al-Askari, the grandmother of our Imam, telling him that there is a amount of inheritance and belongings, all of them for Imam Al-Askari, that he is preventing from them. Imam Al-Askari owned properties, owned houses, owned wealth. All of that Jaafar took. Now they had nothing. And she told him, and this is her more theological reprimand, that he had shared those things which should never have been shared. They were supposed to be secret. Talking, of course, about Imam al-Mahdi and his existence. That you have committed a great sin and a great crime by doing this. In any case, the person who sacrificed herself in all of this is Narjis. And most likely based on the instructions of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam. As they were looking for the Imam, she claimed that she was pregnant. So she was taken to the castle of the Khalifa, where she was under close scrutiny and examination. And the woman of the Khalifa and the woman of the guards, the military, and the woman of the judge started to examine Narjis day and night to see whether she was pregnant or not, whether she would give birth or not, and they kept her in jail. And that was the beginning of her imprisonment. Depending on whether we use the details from Shaykh al-Saduq or Ibn Hazm, she remained in that jail for 3 to 7 years. And then Shaykh al-Saduq says, historians say, there are many events that started to happen in the Abbasid world. There were revolutions that were starting against them. And eventually, this became a lot for them, created a lot of distractions, combined with the fact that there were men inside of the Abbasid government who started to side with her, who wanted to help her secretly. And so among the confusion and among the distractions, the political events that were happening, they were able to create a situation in which she escaped. And then history tells us that at that time, when she escaped, this is when she started to look for somewhere to go. And if we go back to other riwayat, they tell us that the family of Imam Al-Hasany Al-Askari alayhi salam at some point were like homeless people. And the reference is to her. She has nowhere to go. The lands were confiscated. Jaafar was the one who was using them. She did not have anywhere to go. And in the riwayat it says, and no one dared to claim to even know the family of Imam Al-Askari alayhi salam. Because that would mean that your family would be harmed. And so she kind of disappeared into 3 households. One person that is mentioned, and these people are mentioned by name. One person is a Alawi, a descendant of Imam Ali alayhi salam. One person is a descendant of the Abbasids, all of them righteous, knowledgeable people. And one person from the tribe or family of Nobakht. And this is important because the family of Nobakht were very close and many of them held important positions in the Abbasid regime. And it seems that many of them were strong believers, followers of Ahlul Bayt, lovers of Ahlul Bayt, who knew how to conceal their faith. And they continued to protect the Imams and to protect the Shia by being close and working from inside the government of Al-Abbasids. And so this woman started to move around in those houses. What happens next is that at some point there is a reporting. Someone finds out and they go and they tell about her, and the news reaches the Khalifa, and they come and they find her in the exact location where she was reported, and she's captured again. And this most likely happened because of the activities of Jaafar and his group. Because Jaafar started to work with the old companions of Imam al-Hadi and Imam al-Askari, some of whom started to betray the Imam. And as a result of this, many of them held many of the secrets of the Imams. And this is perhaps how they found out exactly where she was located. When they captured this woman, perhaps I should read the hadith in this case directly. This is from Ibn Hazm. Ibn Hazm writes, وزادت فتنة الروافض بصقيل ودعواها إلى أن حبسها المعتضد بعد نيف 20 سنة من موت سيدها. He says the fitna of the Rafidis, the fitna of the Shia, grew even more. This is an extremely important passage. The fitna of the Shia grew more because of Saqil. We should ask a lot of questions. What was this single woman doing that the fitna of the Shia, the fitna of the Rafida was increasing? What do you think was her task? What was she doing behind the scenes? That just because of her, he says the problem that the Shia are continued to grow. Of course, this has to do with the belief in the 12th Imam. This is the role that she's playing. She's stabilizing, she's fortifying, she's consolidating the belief in the 12th Imam and who truly represents him and who is untruthfully, falsely claiming to be representing him, and so on and so forth. So as a result, he says, وَقَدْ عُيِّرَ بِهَا أَنَّهَا فِي مَنْزِلِ الْحَسَنِ بن جعفر النوبختي الكاتب. And so, it was said, she was reported as having been in the house of this man from Nobakht, who was a scribe in the government of Bani al-Abbas, وَقُبِضَتْ فِيهِ. And she was captured in that house. وَحُمِلَتْ إِلَى قَصْرِ الْمُعْتَضِدِ. And she was carried and taken as a prisoner to the castle of Al-Mu'tadid, who was by then the Khalifa. فَبَقِيَتْ هُنَاكَ إِلَى أَنْ مَاتَتْ فِي الْقَصْرِ أَيَّامَ الْمُقْتَدِرِ. And she remained in that castle until she passed away at the time when Al-Muqtadir became the Khalifa. So if you do the math, I will skip the math for you and do it. In the least, she stayed in that jail another 7 years. And then she passed away. And this is the life of the mother of Imam al-Mahdi Ajjalallahu Farajah, in short, and the work that she did. We talked about Bani Nobakht and that she spent another 7 years. It's important to note, why would she be jailed inside the castle? As Ibn Hazm says. And the reason is that they did not want to put her back in a jail where she shares the space with other people, where she continues to teach, where she continues to share the information, where she continues to spread fitna, as they say. So she had to be kept apart inside the jail. And then more than that, if we can now count the total of years that we know of based on history, this means that this woman spent between 10 in the least and 14 years and perhaps more in jail. And I think this is an important way of looking at the life of this woman, and a very different part of her life than the one that we are accustomed to hearing, if we want to focus on the more romanticized story of her coming from Roma as a princess. Why would this woman be chased, searched for, captured, imprisoned? What is going on? First, if we focus on the fact that this was the second time that they catch her, we can understand that she had escaped the first time and she was on a most wanted list. That makes sense. But there has to be more going on. Perhaps one of the most obvious reasons is that this is, based on the perspective of the Abbasids, one of the strongest ways to pressure Imam al-Mahdi Ajjalallahu Farajah to come out. If the Imam sees that his mother is captured, will he not try to do something to find a way to get her out? And so this is most likely one of the important reasons why she was kept in prison. And the pressure stayed on this woman. And then we have to look at the work that she did with very influential people. If she was working with people like the family of Nobakht, who kept her secretly in their houses, And there's a tie-in to be made that this is not a random detail, because as we inshallah all know, in the minor occultation in the first ghaiba of the Imam, he had 4 representatives, direct representatives. These direct representatives, after the first 2, the third one was from the family of Nawbakht. And it took the Shia by surprise that this man became the third Safir, the third representative of the Imam. And this is a discussion for another day, but an important point to keep in mind. The last point, and this is the point of our whole lecture, is that clearly this woman was doing serious work with a network of other people. And this is the point to which we wanted to come. That there seems to have been an underground, under the radar movement being led by this woman that the Abbasids were well aware of. And she was not working all alone. There were many other people working with her. And one of the main reasons for this, and perhaps Imam Al-Askari alayhi salam already knew what was going on, and so he gave her these instructions, and the need for this network for her to lead is that the network that was established, that we can say now, a network of men and representatives, was starting to crumble. With many pieces started to fall. With many people betraying the Imam and the cause of the Imam. So the Imam created a parallel network. This one away from the spotlight, away from the eyes, away from the easy way of the government to see what was going on at that time, the regime of the Abbasids. And this network would be led by a Sayyida Narjis. And this is the reason why there was so much attention on her, to the point where she was captured and imprisoned twice. Who else was with her? Since the discussion is about these amazing women, role models. After her, there was her sister. And there are narrations about some of the roles that her sister played. The sister of Sayyida Narjis was with the house, in the house with them. And when she grew up, later in life, she would be a messenger between different groups of Shia. Many of them would meet with her, and she would give special instructions. One woman that deserves to be studied. Another one is Sayyida Hakimah, one of the greatest women in the lives of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. She's the daughter of Imam al-Jawad. She's the sister of Imam al-Hadi. She is the aunt of Imam al-Askari, and she is the great aunt of Imam al-Mahdi. And she was his nurse, his midwife, his doula, and she is the one who reports many of the narrations around Imam al-Mahdi ajallahu farajah. And truly incredible woman, Sayyida Hakimah, highly praised by Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. She was part of this secret network. Who else? A woman that we encountered a few times already in the story, the grandmother of the Imam, the mother of Imam al-Askari. And so I thought I would try to bring this all to a quick summary with one hadith. And to save time, I'll read it only in English. When they talk about Hakimah, this hadith is about Hakimah, but the role of the grandmother will be revealed. They say about Hakimah, she was one of the most knowledgeable and righteous people. And it is sufficient for her in merit that she was the refuge of the Shia after the passing away of Imam al-Askari. And this is a huge role that she played. What else? So this Rawi, this narrator says, I entered upon Hakimah, the daughter of Muhammad, the son of Ali al-Rida, the sister of Abu al-Hasan, and Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam, of the military of the Askar in the year 262. So this is 2 years after the passing away of Imam al-Askari alayhi salam. I spoke to her from behind a veil. I asked about her faith, and she named whom she considers her leaders. She named the Imams. He's testing her. He wants to make sure that she is truly Hakimah that he wants. Then she said the name of the Imam, and she named him, he says. And this was not customary. The Shia would not name the name of our Imam. because this meant that they would be in danger and he would be in danger. So they have all sorts of ways to talk about the Imam of our time. And that's why he has so many names. In any case, I asked her, may Allah make me your sacrifice. Do we need to believe in him by witnessing him or through reports? And she replied, by reports, as written from Abu Muhammad, who wrote about the matter to his mother. Imam al-Askari wrote that the Shia will believe in Imam al-Mahdi simply by the reports that they hear. They don't need to see him to believe in him. I asked her, where is the child? She said, hidden. I asked her, to whom should the Shia turn? She said, to the grandmother, the mother of Abu Muhammad. So one of the roles of the mother of Imam al-Askari is that she was a representative of this religion. And this man objected. And he said, I asked her, do I follow the one whose will is to a woman? Are you sure? This is really not customary. And she replied, follow the example of Hussein ibn Ali. Follow the example of Imam al-Hussein. You see the level of knowledge of this woman. She says, follow the example of Hussein ibn Ali. For Hussein ibn Ali entrusted his will to his sister Zainab bint Ali. Thus, whatever knowledge came from Ali ibn al-Hussein, Imam al-Sajjad, was attributed to Zainab to conceal and protect Ali ibn al-Hussein. This is Sayyidah Hakimah revealing a large part of a chapter in Islamic history of one of the roles performed by Our Lady Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam. Which brings us to Karbala. And subhanallah, wherever we look, there are indications and arrows back to Karbala. When we look at Karbala, this is one of the roles performed by Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam. And in the couple of minutes that we have left, there is no time to talk about the many other roles that she performed. And there is a reason why she is considered to be second only to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in leading the entire revolution of Karbala. But there were many other women. There are women who sent their support to Imam al-Hussein from afar. Like the woman who told her Christian son who was going to go to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, she told him, tell the Imam Hussein alayhi salam that my mother salutes you and that my mother is proud to console you and support you. And he told her, how are you consoling and supporting the Imam? You're not traveling with me. And she was old and she could not travel. And she told him, I am sending you and sacrificing you. And she knew that he was going to die. And she said, you are going to support Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and console him. And me, by sending you, I am consoling and supporting Fatima al-Zahra, his mother. This is one of the roles of the woman in Karbala. Another one is that there are women who gave up their lives. There are women who were killed in Karbala. One of them is Wahab, a woman who, when her husband came out to fight, she came on the battlefield with him, carrying a pole. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam saw her and stopped her and convinced her to go back to stay with the woman. Finally, she agreed and she went back to stay with the woman, watching her husband fight bravely until he was killed. Then she walked into the battlefield and she sat at his head that was full of sand and blood, removing it from his face and telling him, Hani'an lakal Jannah, congratulations for having reached paradise. Shimr ibn al-Jawshan came with his slave, and when he saw her sitting there, he ordered his slave to strike her head, and she was killed on the spot on the body of her husband. That is Wahab. And then we have women who perhaps gave more than their lives, gave that which is even more difficult to give than your own life. Ramlah, the wife and widow of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, had to give up her son Al-Qasim. On the day of Karbala, Al-Qasim was a boy between 13 and 16 years old. His father had died 10 years ago. He had grown up in the house of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Ali al-Akbar, Imam Zayn al-Abidin were like his older brothers. He grew up with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam like his father. Imam al-Sajjad says that on the eve of Ashura, the night before the 10th day, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam gave a sermon. in which he explained to each one of his companions how they would be killed and how they will enter paradise. But he did not say anything about Al-Qasim. So Al-Qasim came to Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam and said, my uncle, am I not going to be martyred with them? Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, in the riwayah of Imam Al-Sajjad, says, فَأَشْفَقَ عَلَيْهِ الْحُسَيْنِ. Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam had too much mercy and compassion. So instead he tested him. He told him, my son Qasim, how is death in your eyes? He told him, with you, sweeter than honey. Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam simply responded, indeed, death is sweeter than honey. On the next day, in the morning, after the battle started, the first people to enter the battle were the companions of the Imam. After they were all martyred, the household members of the Imam entered the battle, one after the other. And at some point, Al-Qasim saw that all the family members of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, all the men had been killed, including Ali al-Akbar, who led the charge, who was the first. Even 2 of his older brothers got martyred. Imam Al-Hasan gave a lot of martyrs on the 10th. Younger brothers of Al-Qasim got killed afterwards, not on the battle. They came to defend their uncle as he was dying, and they got killed in his lap. At that time, he came to Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, asking Imam Al-Hussein to allow him to enter the battlefield. The Imam refused, sending him back to his mother. He came a second time and asked the Imam to enter the battlefield. The Imam told him, go back to your mother, she's going to need your protection after Karbala. He went back to his mother crying, saying, the Imam will not let me enter the battle. He refuses that I enter the battle. And this is a question for us. We're talking about these ladies as role models. What would you do in her place? When your son comes to you saying the Imam is refusing that I enter the battle, what would be your position? And what did this woman do? She went to a box, to a coffer, in which she kept all the things that Imam Al-Hasan alayhi salam had kept after he left this world. And she looked for the will, a letter that Imam Al-Hasan alayhi salam had written. It was sealed. All she did was give it to her son Al-Qasim. Al-Qasim opened the seal and he read what was written in it. All it said is, after Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, from Al-Hasan, son of Ali, to Al-Qasim, son of Hasan. My son Qasim, if you ever see your uncle lonely, a stranger, and in grave difficulty and challenges, do not fall short in supporting him and helping him. The face of Al-Qasim brightened. He ran to Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, bringing the letter. Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam looked at the will. He wiped the will on his face. This was the handwriting of Imam Al-Hasan alayhi salam, his brother. He turned towards Al-Madinah Al-Munawwarah. He sent his salutations and his salam towards his brother. He's saying, Assalamu alayk ya Aba Muhammad. You took care of us in your life and you continue to take care of us from beyond the grave. Then he told Al-Qasim, my son Qasim, how am I to prevent you from executing the will of your father? Hamid ibn Muslim, the narrator of the Maqtal, says, that's when I should go mention perhaps one detail from Al-Khawarizmi and then Hamid. Al-Khawarizmi says, and then they embraced each other until they fell to the ground. Then Hamid says, a young boy entered into the battlefield, his face like the full moon, wearing only a shirt and trousers and a pair of sandals. Al-Qasim did not have the attire of a warrior, and he entered into the battlefield. And he started to fight. Al-Khawarizmi says he killed around 35 men. And then the string of his left sandal got broken. So he bent down to fix it. And then Hamid ibn Muslim says, the man who was standing beside me said, I swear that I will hurt the heart of his uncle by slaying him. And I told him, Hamid says, I told him, what is wrong with you? I swear to you that if this young man came to me trying to kill me, that I would not raise my hand against him. And isn't it enough for you to see all these people surrounding him and everything they're doing to him that you want to go? He said, I must be the one who slays him. And so he attacked Al-Qasim while his head was bent down, and he struck him on his head. Al-Qasim fell to the ground saying, Assalamu alayka minni ya am ya Hussein. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam rode his horse. He chased the man who struck Al-Qasim on his head. He cut off his arm. The man tried to escape. He fell off his horse, and the horses of the enemies trampled his body, and he died right away. Hamid ibn Muslim says, and then there was a great cloud of dust. He says, I continued to watch to see what would happen next, and once the dust settled, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was standing over the body of Al-Qasim, who was still moving his feet. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was crying, saying to him that it hurts your uncle that you ask him for help and he cannot help you. And then he says, may God curse a people who do this to you. And may God curse a people who have chosen your father and your grandfather as enemies on the day of judgment. Then Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, as he was telling Al-Qasim, patience my son, we shall see each other again in paradise. Al-Qasim's soul departed. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam bent down to carry him. When he carried him, his feet dragged the ground, as the Imam did not have the energy to carry him back into the tent. And he brought him into the same tent where he had put the body of his son Ali al-Akbar previously. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Assalamu ala al-Husayn wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn wa ala awlad al-Husayn wa ala ashab al-Husayn wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi al-tayyibin al-tahirin.